So, my business is helping to prepare people, be individuals, families, or organizations to work in new cultures, to prepare people for cultural transitions. So you could be preparing to take a new position in a new company. You could be, you could be immigrating out. You could be immigrating in. My job is to help you succeed. Now, in the business world, when someone gets placed in an overseas position, okay, maybe they're going to go for a 2-year or 3-year position. In the business world, 80% of the time, that placement is not, does not reach the results that were desired. Now, it doesn't mean it was a failure, okay? But it means that they thought that this person was going to be able to go and achieve this, and 80% of the time they do not achieve that. So it was either a failure or a partial success. So what I help is I help organizations plan how to succeed, and I help individuals and their families prepare how to adapt, how to survive, not just survive, but thrive in cultural transition. So that's my business. Now, my background on that, of how I got there, is very odd and it's kind of personal. Each person will have their own story. Mine is actually grows out of my spiritual and religious kind of faith journey. I did something crazy when I was younger, which I really enjoyed, but I made a commitment in my faith journey that I was going to go help people. And so I moved from America. I sold everything I had. I gave all my possessions away. I gave all my money away. And I moved to Asia, okay? And I moved to a very poor country in Asia. And I said, God, I'm going to stay here until you teach me to love people the way that you love people. I had no idea what I was asking for. But I'm going to stay here until you teach me to love people the way that, until you teach me to love people the way you love people. Well, in that process, that radically changed my life. I started working in refugee camps. I started working with displaced peoples. I started working in all these things. And I began to see a side of humanity that I had never seen. But I also began to experience that myself. And that's where I started to get the passion to work for people in these situations. I came back to America. I went back to the corporate world. And I found myself constantly wanting to work in cross-cultural environments again. So finally, I just took the step. I started my own business, and I just, you start small, and that's how I grew from there. So now I get to do what I get to help people all the time. All right, hope that answers it. Other questions?
What are your future plans for developing your organization?
My personal goals are, I want to make sure that I keep enjoying it. It's not for I want it to have purpose. My business has purpose, and I want to continue to be able to do that. I've worked really hard to get financially stable so that I can volunteer a lot of my time and help. I can make significant life decisions. So if tomorrow, for example, one of you graduate in a few years, and you start this amazing project to help refugees here. And you come to me and you say, hey, I'm starting this project. Can you come help me with it? I want to be able to tell you, yeah, I can help you, and I'll give you a year of my life to get this started. I want to have the freedom to do that. So I worked hard to financially get to the position that I can do that. I own some rental properties, I own this, and I have this business income. So my goal is to stay flexible. I want to be able to take projects like this. So do you remember, we all know the Arab Spring, what happened? Remember what happened in Libya, all the fighting that took place? Right after it started, I had the freedom to hop on a plane, and I flew right along the border on the refugee camps, and I just worked in the refugee camps, helping out. I took a bunch of supplies, and the stories were heartbreaking. I mean, just devastating to hear what was happening with the refugees. I mean, just, if you didn't cry, you're not human. I mean, it was hard to hear those stories. And people were providing food, people were providing water, they were giving them tents to stay in, but no one was helping the people smile. So what I decided to do, I was going to set up a tent, and I was going to help people smile again. I was going to help people enjoy life again. And so that's what I did. And I spent 2 weeks just working in these refugee camps, and I was able to do it for free. I was able to bring money to my business, so that's really the goal. I'm not going to get super rich doing it, but at the end of my life, I'm going to feel like I lived on purpose. That might not be everybody's goals, but I have the freedom to do that. So that's kind of that's what I want to do. And as a consultant, I love training people. So I've actually, over the years, worked with a few people. They worked with me for a few years. I trained them, and they've gone off and started, their own businesses. They've gone off to become. I love seeing that happen too. Again, I don't get rich on it, but I love watching people find a passion and pursue it, which is why I love teaching.
Do you search for the immigrants you want to help, or do they come asking for help?
All of them. It depends on the personal or professional sense. On the professional sense, most of my business comes through just recommendations, word of mouth, referrals. So I help this company, I help this organization, and then they're talking to another company who's running into trouble, and they're saying, oh, we had this guy come out. And so most of it's through referrals, and I get contacted. I actually don't do a lot of marketing. I mean, I do some marketing, but most of my business comes through satisfied customers. I work with you, your project succeeds, your new launch goes well, you tell other people. Or you invite me back for a second project or a third project. On the personal sense, people know that I like helping people, and so I get phone calls all the time. I get heartbreaking phone calls sometimes from places. I spend a lot of time in America, and sometimes I get calls in the middle of the night saying, we have somebody, and here's the situation, and it's bad. And we'll wake up, we'll open up our home, we'll cook a meal, we'll invite them in, and we'll say, until you have this solved, our home is your home. So it can be all over. But what I do know is this, is if my goal is to help the people who are living in exile, I cannot do it by myself. I can't reach everybody. I can't help everybody. It's impossible. So while I would love to spend my time doing that, what I've done mostly is trying to help other organizations or businesses set up systems to be able to help a whole lot more people than I can. So for example, I worked with one group in Arizona that they were doing nothing, in this case with refugees. They were doing nothing to help with refugees. I came in, I worked with them for 6 months to get a project started. We did needs assessments, we did all these things, we created a plan, we did this. 2 years later, that program had become so successful and helped so many people that these people were flown out to Washington, D.C. to get a national award for helping. That was very rewarding because I was the one who helped design the whole program. I didn't need any of the credit, but so I'm trying to help other people learn how to do this. So if I can help with a program teaching English, for example, in a community center, I'm not just going to go teach English. I want to train 10 other people how to teach English, and teach them how to train other people to teach English, so that it can grow and multiply. Thank you, Matthew.
It's more of a general question, but are there any official institutions that help immigrants financially until they settle in? If not, then how do they manage their first year if they do not try to find a job?
It depends on the country. It depends what country they're in. It depends on what agency is being used. Where I work most with immigrants, because with refugees you have a few different issues, okay? You first have the crisis situation. The crisis situation is where you're just trying to get them stable. You're just trying to get them food and shelter. A lot of times tents. You're just trying to, it's temporary, okay? That's usually managed by things like the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, the United Nations, groups like this. But then you get into resettlement. Now resettlement is where they're now going to begin their new life elsewhere. And that depends on what country they're with, who they're working with. The UN might give them some money for a certain amount of time. The US government does a lot to help with housing and things like this. But all of that's short-lived, and so you have to go in and try to help them get back on their feet. Help them try to figure out how to find a job, how to get their kids in school, how to do, and there's all these rules and regulations. And if language is an issue, I mean, there's times I personally would go work with refugee families who are not proficient in English. And they've got children, they're trying to get their kids in school, but to get their kids in school, you have to have certain vaccinations, immunizations, you have to fill out paperwork, but they don't understand any of it. So I show up for a weekly visit, and they just got stacks of papers, from stacks of mail, and they're like, what do we do with this? And I'm like, you're supposed to have this turned in 6 days ago. And they're like, is that why my kid can't go to school? And you're trying to help, and there's a language barrier, and but I mean, it's just practical things, helping them develop their CVs, helping them, I'll do mock interview trainings. But again, I'm trying to make it, this is on the personal sense. My goal when I'm working with organizations and businesses is to help them develop programs that can help way more people than I can.
Okay, can you tell us
Yeah, you're next.
Can you tell us stories about some of your most surprising experiences with clients?
Wow, surprising. I mean, there's so many. There's good to bad. There's everything in between. I mean, some of the good things is how deeper friendships develop. I mean, some of my best friends, I mean, if you took a picture of me with my best friends, I mean, no one would be the same nationality. I mean, it'd be me and 20 different nationalities. And the depth of life that I've had with these people around the world is, I mean, they're as close as family. And I think sometimes that surprises people. They think that I'm moving, I'm never going to have someone like a brother again. I'm never going to have someone that, but when they find these people, it's an amazing experience. So that's positive. And what's really nice too is when you see people who come in as refugees, they're often dependent on others. They can't help other people yet. They're just recipients a lot of times. But it's so exciting to see as they grow in a new culture and they start that there's, like when I just moved here, I had to pack up all my stuff, get rid of it, whatever. But when I just put out an email or, hey, who wants to come help, it was all these immigrants and refugees that I've helped for the past 10 years. They all showed up to help me now move for my transition. And they were ones with experience now. They were ones, and over the years, I've, given them money, helping them how I can. Now they're the ones coming, hey, here's some, take this. Here's some, buy your kids some extra treat in the airport. So that was very rewarding. The other side, the hard side, is when you have the hard situations. I've been called because just accidents happen. One of our close friends, their son got hit by a car. He was riding a bike, he just rode right into the street, hit by a car. He lived, but those scary calls, the parents are just screaming. They don't really know what to do. But you're the only person they know to call. And now you're trying to figure out what to do. And then funny things happen. With the kid that got hit by the car, I had to go pick up one of the daughters to take, and she's crying. She's like, I don't know if my brother's alive or dead. She gets there, and he's okay, but she sees that, the brother sees that the sister was crying, and he starts laughing at her. And she gets so mad and starts hitting him, and and just like the whole situation changes now. But there's some really hard stories. There was one that was just heartbreaking. It was a Somali family, and they were having difficulty adapting. The father was, the whole family was having difficulty adapting. And the father became very physically abusive and started beating the kids. One of the daughters was getting beat and finally just ran out. She just ran out of the house. Didn't know where she was going. And she finally ends up in a woman's shelter for the night, but they can't keep her. She's age, or I don't remember all the details. She can't go home. She's got nowhere to go. And I get a call. I get these types of calls. What do we do? So we open up our home. We let her live with us for 8, 10 months, 12 months. I told her she could live there as long as she wanted. But now we're in a real tough situation. You know, my goal is not to break families apart. I want to help families transition. I've got a very tough situation. You've got a Somali father who has a runaway daughter living in an American's home. This is a tough situation. What do you do? And my goal is to see the family come back together. Okay? Where do you start? And so I start talking, I talked to one family member first. I invite a family member over to visit us, to see us. We're an honorable family. This is what we want to see happen. We got a call in the middle of the night, But they're like, this is what they say. If her father finds out where you are, he'll kill you. Okay? It's good. I still have the goal of seeing the family come together. How do we do that? And that was, it's not the only case I've seen like that. And the thing is, on a personal level, I might be able to deal with this, but I'm now trying to train organizations to deal with this. I'm trying to now have people set up systems to handle these complex situations. I've lived in all these countries. I have these language backgrounds. I have cultural awareness. But what happens when some good-hearted American who is culturally ignorant comes and tries helping? Is the situation a bit worse before it gets better? So this is the type of training that I have to provide. I also this is total change, and I'll stop with this story. I'm training a business person. A business person says, I'm moving overseas. I work with Boeing. I work with whoever. I work with some Microsoft. I'm being sent to this place for 3 years. I'm scared to death for me and my family. What do I do? And I can say, well, how much time do you have? And I have to ask, how much money do you have? And then I set up a plan for them. And then when I get that call 6 months later from them overseas saying that their family's doing excellent and that they love it there and their kids are doing, it's so rewarding.
Throughout your experiences, which organization do you think is the most successful or has the biggest influence?
It really depends. Which organization has the best influence? That's a really tough question. But here is something where it gets really difficult. Is the people who get paid to do it often do it out of a job. The people who do it voluntarily do it out of passion, compassion, care, but they don't have the money to do it. So a lot of times what I try to do is try to bridge these two. I want to get the organizations that have the money, the governments, these big organizations, and I want to try to pair them up with community groups. So like here on campus at AUC, there's all these student-led community groups trying to make a difference. That's awesome. They have passion. They're not required to do that, but they want to do that. But they don't have money to do that. So how can I bring these two together? And this is where we get the best results, is when we have this. Now there are sometimes passionate people that are getting paid to do it, and there are sometimes people who are volunteering for the wrong reasons. But usually, when you can bring these together, you get great combinations. That doesn't totally answer your question, but it answers what I try to do with this.
Throughout your work experience, which minorities or groups do you think naturalize in management degree?
Okay, it's a great question. Which groups integrate the best, adapt the best when they immigrate? It's a tough question because there's every answer I could give you an exception to it. Overall, Chinese do a really good job, and we don't know why. I mean, they do a really good job integrating in the U.S. A lot of your East Asians do. The Japanese, the Koreans, they do a really good job. The Iranians, interestingly, do a really good job. But it always goes back to the personal level. It depends what reason they're there for. Some people are there to experience a new culture, to learn a new culture. Some people are scared to death of the new culture. Some people have left their countries and they hate their countries because of what's happened to them. Other people love their countries and that's all they think about. It totally depends. But here's one thing that I have seen is if there is a very, very large community of an ethnic group, there is less motivation to adapt. So, I mentioned Somalis. Where I'm from in the Phoenix area, there's a part of town that has a lot of Somalis in it. And if you live in the Biltmore apartments, you're probably Somali, and you're probably not adapting to U.S. culture really well. Because they're all Somalis around there, and it's just like mini Somalia in this complex, okay? Now, you take that same person there, and you move them out to another part of town where there's no other Somalis. You take the same person who wasn't adapting there, and you move them there, and all of a sudden, they're forced to adapt. And so, you can't say, there's so many of these other environmental factors that play into it. But when you see, so I like working, for example, with communities, when they come and they're like, okay, there's only 6 of us in this whole city. They're usually adapt really well. Because for them to have community, they have to find their community within their new host community. Does that help?
So I have something related to this. So which of the following new immigrants do you provide them with the most security? Is it people from their own nationality, or in the host country, or official institution?
Okay, where do they get their security? From people within their own nationalities and their new locations, or is it institutions, or is it... again, one of the first things that I do when I'm working with, it doesn't matter if I'm professional, if I'm getting paid a whole lot per hour, to doing it, everywhere in between, voluntary, forced. The first thing you have to do, if you really want to see something be effective on the personal sense, is you have to find out what that person's goals are. What do they want to achieve? Why are they here? Okay? If I'm talking to a father who says, I've moved to America for my children. So you don't want to be here? Nope. You're here because of your children. Okay? I now know a whole lot of information. They're like, nope, I think the rest of my life is going to be miserable. But if my children are happy, then I'm happy. I know his goals. I might also try to have him enjoy life. But if someone says, I'm here for 2 years to study, to get this degree, and I'm gone. Okay, I know their goals. So you have to find out what their goals are. Some people really want to make local friends. They want to learn local culture. For some people, they want to, start eating the local meals. They want to enjoy the local sports, watch the local shows, whatever. Other people, they don't want that. And it's not my job to tell them what they have to do. Now, I might tell them the consequences of those decisions, but if I can identify what their felt needs are, then we can begin to make a plan. Okay? Now it's not so much your question, but where they're going to find their security, it's going to depend. Some people find their security not in the organizations, not in the people of their own community, but they find it in the new host community, because that's what their goals are. Their goals are, I want my new friends to be from the host community. And if that's what their goals are, that's where they're gonna find that security, okay? If it's I wanna have financial stability, then it's gonna be the organization, no, it just depends.
So which communities would be most repulsive to immigrants?
Say again?
Which communities would be repulsive or be
Repul-
anti?
Yeah, anti? It depends, again, it depends what country you're in. The question is, which communities are most anti-immigrants, most repulsed by immigrants? It really depends country to country. I've worked in so many different projects around the world in different situations. You have to be aware of the local context. And there's local context that I will continue to be surprised by my whole life. So if I'm working in a refugee camp in northern India, I have to know what are the local ethnic things. If the guards are from one ethnic group and they don't like the people that are the refugees, it's a totally different situation than if they see them as similar. There's current realities, there's political realities. You have to consider all of these things to get a feel for it. And you can kind of say, for example, big urban areas tend to be more diverse and more open to outsiders and different cultures. But the problem we find a lot of times in big urban areas is people are so busy that they don't have time. So people might look at you and they may not think bad thoughts about you, being an outsider, but they have no time for you. Whereas you might take somebody into a small town, and now people might think, oh, I've never met somebody like you, so there's this distance, but the people have time for you. So once you overcome these barriers, you might find that people invite you into their home every night of the week for a meal. So and that's the complexity of all of exile and immigration. There is just no one situation. And there is no one personality. But what I do believe is that if you can find out, if you can determine the local context and you can determine the goals of the person, you can make any situation successful. Now, I might be optimistic, but I believe it's possible.
When dealing with clients from different cultures and ethnicities, did you ever bear in mind or have a certain idea about a certain group of people and then find out in the end that it's completely wrong? Certain stereotypes?
I'm sure I have, but I think my job a lot of times is helping other people discover that reality. So I worked on one project, which was really interesting. It was during, obviously the Sudan and the U.S. does not always have great relations. And it was during the height of the Darfur crisis when there was all this pressure. And I thought, I want to do something fun. I'm going to take a group of government, business, and religious leaders from America to meet government, business, and religious leaders in Sudan. And we're going to get these groups together talking. We're going to have a civil discussion over this instead of a politically charged, media-driven discussion. So I flew the group in. We sat down for 8 days. We went on the Nile together in boats and all these things. The whole thing was amazing because both sides had incredible misunderstandings and misperceptions about each other. No side had ever actually heard from the other side in a personal way. They had and so sitting there and having it was just amazing. And at the end, they're laughing together, and they're, they saw the human element. I remember a time when I worked with a good friend of mine, Abdelaziz Sadiq from Sudan. He lives in Chicago, and this is in the post 9/11 environment in America, and we were trying to do stuff for Muslim-Christian relations. So we created this endeavor in Arizona that became a template for the other 50 states. And where we got top Muslim, Islamic clerics together and Christian leaders together, and we had them like speak with each other, have meals together, visit each. I mean, it was amazing to see what was taking place. But just both sides at the end, they're like, "Wow, we misunderstood so much. We had no idea." So that experience that you're talking about, part of my job is helping the people have those experiences. Because you can't succeed cross-culturally until you start breaking up these stereotypes. And my job in helping people succeed cross-culturally is to break up these stereotypes. And the great thing is, I get paid to do this. I mean, you think about it, it's just fun. This is like, I get to help humanity become better, and people pay me to do it. I mean, it's fun. Here and then back there.
How would you describe the Egyptian culture?
How would I describe the Egyptian culture? I don't think there is an Egyptian culture. When I'm out in the countryside, and when I go to the reef, I mean, compared to what's about it, I mean, these are two different worlds. You can't walk past it, eat, sit down. It's totally different. Here in the city, people are so busy, and I am not a big city person. I like being relaxed. I like sitting down and talking with people. So as soon as I get a break, I'm out of Cairo. I got friends up and down the Nile and the Delta, and I like going there. I like hearing chickens in the background, and this is my personal thing. It totally varies. And I think right now, with just the political environment, things are changing. I did feel that Egyptians were warmer to outsiders not too long ago, but now there's just a lot of fear of outsiders and their involvement, what they're doing, and there's more suspicion. I get asked if I'm a spy a lot. It just didn't happen as much as it used to in the past. I mean, it's happening now more, than it did. So, but no, I love Egypt. I mean, I only thought I was going to be here 2 years and then be elsewhere, and I just signed a contract to stay. So, and my boys love it.
What's the usual socioeconomic background of your client?
The average socioeconomic background of the client? It depends. It depends what side I'm on. If it's a professional sense, and even then it varies, because sometimes it's an individual. It's an individual who's contacting me, not in their company's role. They're just going, my company's transferring me, and I want my family to do well. Okay? And they have money. Because if they can contact me on the personal level and pay for it, they've got money. On the business level too, if they're preparing for plans, they've got money. Down here on the personal level or on the community involvement level, they don't have as much money. So you've got the whole range. Which again, is one of the things that I love about my business is I get to work with, I remember one trip I went on, I flew out of the country after 4 days, and my hotel bill was $20,000. I was like, wow, I can't even believe it. I mean, it's just, I'm working with this level down to living in a tent in a refugee camp. It's everywhere in between. Now, but here's what one of the interesting things about that is, as much as some of these experiences are different, they're all humans. They're all people. Their dads, their moms, their sons, their daughters. It doesn't matter where in the world, when I watch a mom and dad send off their son or daughter to go to school in another country, they're scared. They're worried. They wonder what's going to happen to their son or daughter. They wonder what the new host country is going to be like. And so it doesn't matter how much money you have. You're still concerned about your family. You still want to know, are you going to be okay? Your resources to answer those questions might be different, but they're asking the same questions. generally, are there countries that are more accepting of immigrants? Yes, there are. There are some countries that are much more helpful, others that are less. But again, you always have to consider the local context, because this country here might normally be closed, but in this situation, it's touched the heart of that country. It might be because it's a similar ethnicity. It might be because they have some history with that country. It might be because it was, you know, the human compassionate side touched them. It might be because of religious similarities. It might be normally they're closed, but in this situation, they just accepted 10,000 refugees. So one of the challenges, and this is beyond my job, one of the challenges that you face, that you see, is when a political crisis breaks out, and now you have all these refugees or war or something, you have to find out what country is going to accept these people. Okay? What country is going to accept these people? And how does that appeal happen? So if these people have a second language of French, then maybe we got to try to find a French-speaking area of the world to accept them. If they, so you have to ask these types of questions. Sometimes you'll just take anyone you can get, but it depends. And so you get like in my area, we have a lot of people from Iraq, Afghanistan, Somalia, Burma, from where else? There's a host of them. But there's just these communities that are in my area. But you go to another area and it could be a totally different group. Other questions? I don't even know what time it is.
Can you, what do you know about the Syrian refugees in Egypt? Are you in touch with some of them? And can you speak to that a little bit? Because there's a lot of opinion in Egypt about their situation, and so maybe you could share
Okay,
something.
so I don't want to enter into the political difficulties here. I'm the American. It's not good for Americans to go getting involved in local politics. That usually never works well. What I can say is a very interesting experience is when I'm out in public, when I'm out, outside of AUC, I speak Arabic all the time. Now my Arabic's not very good, but I speak Arabic because I live in an Arabic-speaking country. I've got to learn. That's what I tell people. Helps to learn the local language. So I'm trying to do that. I speak Arabic with my kids. I speak, we're trying to figure it out. We're not very good, but people see us speaking Arabic, and they immediately know we're not Egyptian. So they ask us all the time if we're Syrian. Now, before the summer, when I was here before the summer, people would ask me, "Are you Syrian?" And they would say it with a smile on their face. Okay? I came back, because I was gone for a little bit. A lot happened. People ask me if I'm Syrian now, and their face, not what it used to be. I mean, it's so tangible. Now, I was just looking for a flat. I was looking around looking for a flat, and I probably talked to 25 different simsars, trying to, find a place. And they would ask me. They would say, where are you from? Or they say, are you Syrian? And I'm like, no. And they're like, you good? I'm not Syrian. And we sit down and finally I'm not Syrian. Don't worry, I'm not American. You good? Honestly, you're really American? And I'm like, I'm really American. How about your father? He's American too. But what happened was this, is it was obvious that if they thought I was Syrian, they were not going to show me a place. They were not going to show me a flat. And once I convinced them I wasn't Syrian, it was like, okay, we can show you a flat now. It was just a big change of environment. Now, I won't speak into it beyond that, but even as a non-Syrian foreigner, I have felt the climate change. I do have another foreign friend who there's a Syrian who's lived in Egypt for a long time. He's an American, but he has a roommate who's a Syrian, who has lived in Egypt for a long time. Um, and so they're roommates, but his friend left the country and he hasn't come back, and he doesn't know why he hasn't come back. So he doesn't know if he just can't get back in. I mean, the guy comes and leaves often, but he's just suddenly not come back. So, but that's what happens in these types of environments. You start to wonder, you start to ask questions. Everybody starts to go, what's going on? What are they saying? What are they doing? And so I hope things get better soon.
Is there anything that we can do to help each one of us?
Yes. Yes. I don't know about help in which way, but there's two things. Again, kind of like my business. There's the professional and then there's this personal level. I ask my students, and I'll ask you now, how many of you have a family member or a friend who is Egyptian but living in another country? Look at this. This would not have happened a few generations ago. Now, so that's the other way. How many of you have a friend who is living in Egypt but is not Egyptian? You guys can all help. You can all help. Okay? Be aware of the realities that people face and be sensitive to those, interact with those. Okay, so that's on a personal level. And most of these people are doing it because there's, willing. They're people who have access to resources and are choosing. But Cairo is a huge, huge destination for refugees in Africa. We don't even know the numbers. The numbers have been guessed to be a lot. But not just refugees, but people coming here to learn Arabic from around the world. This is a very, very diverse city. And you have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who were not born in Egypt living here in this city. And many of them are facing tough situations. Many of them are refugees, many of them are poor, many of them don't have access to resources, many of them live in tough environments. I would encourage all of you to volunteer. I think volunteerism is so important. There's groups out there that are helping, teach English, they teach different skills, job training, all these things. And if you can just give an evening a week or an evening every other week, it can really make a difference. Because I can tell you this, Egyptians outnumber the non-Egyptians by a lot. So if every Egyptian would just help 1 hour a week, it would change everything.
Which country do you work the most in? What experience?
I've worked the most in America, being my home country. Nepal, I've worked, because I lived there for a few years, so I took a lot, and because most of what I do is relational, it's networking, it's things like this, and once you get established in an area, you keep getting calls. So here's an odd one, Mauritania. Most Americans can't even find it on a map. I get calls from Mauritania a lot because I consulted there once, and then I did again, and then another group, and then another group, and I just get calls like, "Can you come help? We've got this project," and crazy calls. I had to go there one time because Al Qaeda had killed 4 French tourists, and then just shortly thereafter they caught a guy who was working on a development project, and they killed him right in the streets. Within 1 month, 1/2 of all expatriates working in the country had left. They were gone. And now you have all these projects that are working there that have half of their expatriate force that was helping gone. And what do we do? So I went out and I visited, and it was hard. It was really interesting because it was uncomfortable feeling. It was literally like, this is right here where they were just killed 2 weeks ago. How do we get people to come back? So I had to sit down and try to come up with a plan to try to retain their workforce as well as to attract a new workforce, how to do training in light of these new security realities. It was Mauritania. So it's been all over. I've worked a lot in Mexico, Thailand.
What do
Personally, what I do when I face pressure, again, this goes back to find what you love doing and do it. Find your passion and do that, because pressure cannot deter passion. Pressure sometimes makes you get more excited about passion. When I started my business, I had no plans to do it. But as I said, I moved overseas and I said, God, I am staying here until you teach me to love the world the way that you love the world. Once I've understood that, everything becomes easy in my case. And so helping people is, love hurts. And if anybody, anyone who's a parent, if you love your kids, you're gonna feel pain in your life, because you're gonna see things happen to them, and it's gonna hurt. And but if you care, you'll get hurt. If you love people, you'll get hurt. But I believe good is stronger than evil, and if we stop caring, if we stop loving, then that's when bad things happen to us. So find your passion, do good, volunteer, help people, and it's so rewarding. You'll be glad. We're out of time, or can we take one more?
I think we're out of time.
Okay.
If you'd like to ask questions, I think we can be here for another 2 minutes if you don't mind, and answer questions online. Maybe we can post them over here. I'd really like to thank Matthew for this. I mean, this is definitely not enough. And if you still have questions and you feel that some of the questions on today's meet, we have our class blogger today, Khadija. I don't know who's blogging in your class. If you could keep track of these, we could compile them, and maybe you could schedule another interview, or maybe even you could write something up for us. We'll discuss the format, because I didn't think it was we were going to have so many questions. Thank you. It's extremely enlightening. Anything you'd like to say?
I'd like to say quickly too to all of you. You guys chose, many of you chose the theme Imagining Exile. There were other themes you could have chosen, and other good themes. But you chose it, many of you, because you saw something in it, the human element, you saw that. And so I just want to say thank you for having that human touch inside of you, that's saying, I want to know more, and asking the questions of how can I help. So may you go out and do that well. Thank you.